Kwa jina ninaitwa Tulo Fundi, mmoja kati ya maafisa elimu taaluma wa mkoa wa Morogoro.
Ninaitwa Mwalimu Jackson Mpanguli, ni afisa taaluma wa mkoa wa Morogoro.
Lengo kuu la kuanzishwa kwa kipindi cha Mwalimu wa Wiki ni kuongeza ubora wa ufundishaji na ujifunzaji wa masomo ya elimu ya msingi na sekondari.
Kwa nini tumefikiria tufanye hivyo? Itakuwa ni nafasi ya mwalimu huyo ambaye atakayepata nafasi ya kushiriki katika kurekodiwa huko kuonyesha umahiri wake.
Walimu wawe huru kutoa maoni yao baada ya kutazama kipindi cha mwalimu mwenzao.
Lakini vile vile itakuwa ni nafasi ya kufanya tathmini kwa upande wa mwalimu mwenyewe, kwa maana ya kwamba yeye pia baada ya kipindi kurekodiwa atakuwa na wasaa wa kuangalia jinsi ambavyo ametimiza jukumu lake. Lakini lingine pia itakuwa ni njia mojawapo ya sisi wenyewe kama viongozi wa masuala ya elimu kufanya tathmini, kuona walimu wetu wanatekelezaje majukumu yao.
Leo katika kipindi cha Mwalimu wa Wiki, kwa niaba ya afisa elimu mkoa ambaye ndiye mwanzilishi wa kipindi hiki, tumetembelea shule ya sekondari Morogoro Sekondari iliyopo katika manispaa ya Morogoro mkoani Morogoro. Na leo hii hapa tutakutana na mkuu wa shule ambaye pia atakuwa amemchagua mwalimu wa wiki kwa kuzingatia vile vigezo vilivyoainishwa. Na leo tutaona anatekeleza vipi majukumu yake, ikiwemo ni njia zipi anazotumia katika kufundisha, lakini vile vile tutaona ni namna gani anashirikisha darasa lake wakati wa ufundishaji. Twende tukaone.
Kwa majina yangu naitwa Mwalimu Joseph Kretus Kapiuka, ni makamu mkuu wa shule Morogoro Sekondari. Kwanza kabisa napenda kuchukua nafasi hii kumshukuru afisa elimu wetu mkoa Baravuga kwa wazo zuri ambalo amekuja nalo, ambalo na hakika litaweza kuinua kiwango cha ufaulu na kuhamasisha walimu kujituma zaidi kwa kuanzisha wazo la kuwa na mwalimu wa wiki. Kama makamu mkuu wa shule kwa hapa kwetu Morogoro Sekondari, kwa wiki hii mwalimu ambaye tumemchagua kuwa mwalimu wa wiki ni Mwalimu Edgar Msimbe, mwalimu ambaye hakika ni mchapakazi, ni mwalimu ambaye anajituma kwa muda hata wa ziada. Utakuta unaweza kaja hapa asubuhi saa 12, utamkuta yuko darasani anafundisha, vipindi vya kawaida anaingia anafundisha, akipata muda wa ziada tena jioni anaingia anafundisha kwa kujitolea. Kwa hiyo kwa kweli anastahili kuwa mwalimu wa wiki. Asante sana.
Good morning. How are you?
We are fine.
Get seated. So, just before we commence today's lesson, let us remind ourselves, what did we discuss last time? So, if you remember last time, we shared about the concept of the cross-section of the river, the cross profile of the river, of the river, where you remember we shared that the cross-section of the river refers to the section of the river that describes the distance of the river from one river bank to another. Do you remember?
Yes.
But again, you remember we said that the cross-section of the river usually it's not homogeneous in all stages of the river valley development. That means it is heterogeneous, where at the upper section of the river, we said the cross section of the river is normally experience a narrowed V shape. A narrowed V shape. Whereas when it goes to the middle section of the river, we said that the cross profile of the river usually experience an open V shape. And lastly, we said as it goes to the lower section of the river, the cross profile of the river usually experience an open U shape. Do you remember? Yes. And thereafter we went further looking on the longitudinal section of the river, where we said this describes the section of the river from its source to the mouth. Assume this one is A, that is B. So when you talk about the source, this is the source, this is the mouth of the river. And this is the upper section, this is the middle section, and this one is basically the lower section. So the distance from here to here is what we call the longitudinal profile of the river. And remember we said this is a function of headward erosion in the river channel. Do you remember that one? Yes. But again we said the cross section is just a function of lateral erosion at the river channel. And thereafter we went further by looking on the concept of graded river profile. Do you remember? Yes. Where we said the graded profile of the river refer to the state of balance. State of balance. Balance attained by the river in its own valley. We said it talks about the balance achieved between erosion, transportation, and deposition. You remember? Yes. But again, we said basically the graded profile of many rivers in the world are not straight. That means the graded profile of many rivers in the world are normally not straight. Rather, they experience a concave shape. A concave shape. And then you have seen, therefore, the attainment of the graded profile of the river is questionable. That means it cannot be achieved. That means the rivers are not straight, and we looked on what are the basic factors that influence the graded river profile, where we have seen the variation in terms of climate. We talked about variation in terms of the nature of the rock, but also we have seen what we call climatic variation. As I said, we have seen continuous rate of erosion, we have seen river rejuvenation, the presence of obstacles, and so forth and so forth. Is that one very clear? Yes. Now today, we are going to discuss about stages in the development of the river valley. The river valley. Stages in the development of the river valley. Now you have to understand that usually the river valley develop as the results of surface runoff. As the results of surface runoff by the influence of running water. Usually the river valley develop as the results of surface erosion, particularly by the influence of what you call running water. And we say, basically when we talk about the river valley development, remember, any erosion that is influenced by running water is what we call fluvial erosion. Now, erosion by running water is known as fluvial erosion. Erosion by running water is what we call fluvial erosion. Remember, this is fluvial with AL. But also we have another concept that is fluvial with the O. You don't have AL, rather you have fluvial, this one. Fluvial, this one. Do you see? Yes. Now, when you see fluvial with the O, remember this means landforms that are formed as the results of glacial deposition. Is that clear? That means we shall see when we are going to cover glaciation. So basically, erosion by running water is what we call geographically as fluvial erosion. Now, there are three stages that are involved, three stages involved in the development of the river valley, there are three stages that are involved in the development of the river valley, where number one, you have the upper stage. It is called the upper stage or youth stage. Or it is also called a torrent stage. Torrent stage. And number two, we have the middle stage. Middle stage, which is also called the mature stage. It is also called the mature stage. And number three, we have what we call the lower section or lower stage. It is called the lower stage or lower section or lower course, but it is also named as a plain stage. Plain stage. And basically, in each stage of the development of the river valley, usually the function of the river is different. In each stage, the function of the river is different. And basically, the landforms that are going to be formed are also different. Now, let us start with stage number one, that is the upper stage. As I said, this stage is also called the torrent stage, but it is also called the youth stage, but it is also called the upper course of the river. So this is the stage of the river where the river owns its origin. It is a stage whereby the river owns its origin, or it is the stage where the river starts. It is the stage where the river owns its origin, and it is the stage where the river starts. And at this stage, usually the slope of the land is high, steep slope. There is steep slope. As we said last time, you remember we said usually the river owns its origin in the highland areas. Is that clear? Yes. So if it owns its origin in the highland areas, automatically the nature of the slope should be very high. So the slope is basically high at the upper section. But again, the speed of the river, the velocity of the river is also high. The river is high. At the upper stage, the velocity of the river is very high. Very high, because it's a point where the river now starts. But again, we are saying that the main function of the river at the upper course, erosion. The main function is erosion. The main function of the river is erosion, particularly vertical erosion. That is particularly vertical erosion. Particularly vertical erosion that results to the deepening of the river valley. Remember last time we shared about vertical erosion. That clear? Yeah. So basically, the main function of the river is erosion, particularly vertical erosion that results to the deepening of the river valley. So this is what is happening at the upper section of the river, where the speed of the river is very high. The main function of the river is erosion, and also we are saying that the slope is very high, and the high slope or steep slope is what causes now the speed or the velocity of the river to be very high. Now from there, let us see the landiforms formed at the upper section of the river, The landiforms that are formed at the upper section of the river, we have many of them. But number one, we have the V-shaped valley. V-shaped valley. This is a river valley with V-shape. When we say V-shaped, it means it have a shape, it looks like a V. It's a river valley with V-shape. That is formed is a river valley. With V-shape. This river valley with the V-shape formed at the results. Of the dominance of vertical erosion, formed the results of the dominance of vertical erosion at the upper section of the river. It looks like a V. That is the meaning of a river valley with V shape. So you can be able to draw like this one. It's a river valley with V shape formed at the results of the dominance of vertical erosion at the upper section of the river. So it can look like this one. This is what we call a V-shaped valley, this one. V-shaped valley. It's a river valley with a V-shape that is formed at the results of the dominance of vertical erosion in the river channel. That is, will form a structure that looks like a V. That is V-shape. Then number two, we have what we call interlocking spars. Interlocking spars. And interlocking spars, these are projection of higher lands. These are projection of higher lands that cuts across the river bedrock. These are projection of higher lands that cuts across the river bedrock. These are what we call spars or interlocking spars, projections of higher lands that cuts across the river bedrock. These are what we call spars or interlocking spars. Why are we calling them interlocking? Because they are intersecting each other. They are called interlocking because they are they are intersecting or they are intermingling each other. This is the meaning. So they can look like this one. You can have like this one. So this one, it cuts across somewhere there. It cuts across. These are what we call spars. Because you cannot be able to see the river bedrock being very smooth. Rather, it's going to have some interlocking, some spars, some cuttings. And these are basically being cut by pebbles in the river bedrock. These are what we call spars or interlocking spars. But again, we have gorges, number 3. Gorges. These are steep-sided trough. These are steep-sided trough. These are steep-sided trough or depressions. These are steep-sided trough or depressions formed as the results formed are the results of the dominance of vertical erosion in the interlocking spars. Formed are the results of the dominance of erosions in the interlocking spars. Interlocking spars. These are steep-sided trough or depressions that are formed when erosion becomes more active, more pronounced, more dominance in the interlocking spars. Now you can see these are spars. Sometime now erosion become more active in these spars. That makes now these spars to be more deeper. That clear? They become now more deeper, like depressions now. So when these spars become more deeper, like depressions, these now are what you call gorges. These are what we call gorges. You can draw. They are less or more similar to the spars. So you can draw like this one. So you can find that this become more steep-sided, more trough. This very steep. More steep-sided depressions. So they become very, very active. So you can have, it can look like this one. It can look like this one, but it is not that much, it's not like a V, but basically there is very steep depression here, which is going to be formed. Very steep. Very, very steep, yes. It's going to be formed. These are what we call gorges. Gorges. These are gorges. Now, sometime, what is going to happen is that sometime these gorges, they may become more impressive in appearance. That means the morphological structure of the gorges sometimes become more attractive, more impressive, more beautifully. You can even enjoy to look at them. That clear? So when the gorges become more attractive in appearance, they are no longer called gorges. They are now called canyon. Canyons are gorges that looks more impressive in appearance. Canyons are gorges that looks more impressive in appearance. And their formation is a result of vertical erosion in the interlocking spars. That is what we call canyons. But again, we have another one which we call it as a Nicky Point. Nicky Point. Nicky Point. Now, a Nicky Point is basically a bend. Is a bend or is a point. Is a bend. Bend or point. Point where water suddenly descend. Where water suddenly descend from the highland to the lowland areas. The lowland area is a point where water suddenly descend from the highland areas to the lowland areas. That is what you call a Nicky Point. For example, if you have a river channel like this one, a river flow like this one, somewhere here there is a bend where water starts to fall very rapid like this one. Then this river continues. So a Nicky Point is this point here, where the river starts to descend the water starts to descend very suddenly, very rapidly. This is what we call Nicky Point. That is what we call a Nicky Point. It's a point where water starts to descend very rapidly or very suddenly from the highland areas to the lowland areas. That is what we call a Nicky Point. But apart from the Nicky Point, we have waterfall. Waterfall. We have waterfall here. Waterfall. That is number 6, waterfall. Waterfall. So make sure that when you write, you don't have to write in short form like this one. Waterfall. Now, waterfall refers to the sudden descent of water. Sudden descend of water, sudden descent of water from the highland to the lowland areas. Lowland area. Is the sudden descent of water from the highland to the lowland areas. That is what you call a waterfall. And basically, a waterfall is formed after a nicky point is developed. For example, here, you have this one is a nicky point. So automatically from this point, the water now starts falling down the slope very fastly, very quickly. Now, this point here, that is just below the nicky point, is what we have now, waterfall, this one. Waterfall. So waterfall is a sudden descent or rapid falling of water down the slope, and basically it is developing below the nicky point. That is what we call a waterfall. Now we shall then see the geological structure that determines the formation of waterfall later, but let me finish the features in general, then I will tell you the mechanism that is involved in the formation of waterfall. So number 6, we have what we call plunge pool. Plunge pool. So a plunge pool is a depression. It is a depression that is accumulated with water, and it is basically developed at the base of the waterfall. It is a depression that develop at the base of waterfall. It is a depression like landform that usually develop at the base of a waterfall. That is what we call a plunge pool. It's a depression. It's normally developing here at the base, because after this water falls suddenly down the slope, they are going to be accumulated. They are going to be accumulated somewhere there, and they form a very large depression, and that depression is what we call a plunge pool. That clear? So for those who have ever gone to Udzungwa, we have the highest waterfall somewhere Udzungwa, and when you try to observe that waterfall, at the base of that very big waterfall there is a depression, which is normally students goes there for swimming. They are swimming when they had a visit at that particular place. That is what we call a waterfall. So these three landforms can also be presented on the very same diagram. You can draw one diagram and indicate where is the nicky point, and where is the waterfall, and where is the plunge pool. Then number 8, you have potholes. That is potholes. These are small circular depressions. Small circular depressions. These are small circular depressions that are cut by pebbles on the river bedrock. These are small circular depressions that are cut by pebbles on the river bedrock. They are small depressions which are circular in nature. Small depressions which are circular in nature. These are what we call potholes. These are what we call potholes. These are potholes. After these potholes, we have another one which we call them as rapids. We have rapids. Rapids, you are talking about sudden descent of water from the highland areas to the lowland areas without forming waterfalls. Sudden descent of water from the highland to the lowland area without forming waterfall. Sudden descent of water from the highland areas to the lowland areas without forming waterfall. That is what we call rapids. Sudden descent of water from the highland areas to the lowland area is what we call rapids. For example, you can have like this one. You have a river that flows this way. So here water can just flow very suddenly from the highland to the lowland areas, but they don't form waterfall. This is what you call rapids. Rapids. Sudden descent of water from the highland to the lowland areas without forming waterfall, that is rapids. And lastly, we have what you call boulders. Boulders. Lastly, we have boulders. Boulders are large pieces of rock that remain untransported due to their heavy weight. Sometimes, you know, the materials that are carried by river varies in terms of size. Is that clear? Some of them are very big, some of them are very small. Those big materials cannot easily be transported to the mouth of the river, so they can remain on the way. So those large pieces that remain untransported due to their heavy weight is what we call boulders. Is that clear? This is what we call boulders. Anyway, generally today we have seen about the general idea on the stages of the river valley development, and particularly today we looked specifically about the upper section. Is that clear? Where we said, how does this stage looks like? The characteristics of the stage. Where we said the speed of the river is high. We said it's the point where the river originates. We said usually the slope of the land is very high. And we said the main function of the river is erosion. I think you remember that one. Yes. Then we have seen some of the features that are basically formed at that stage. Can you try to point to them very quickly before we close? Landform number one? Number one? Pardon? V-shaped valley. V-shaped valley. It's better you raise up, then you speak out. Number two? Interlocking spars. Number three? Gorges. Number four? Waterfall. Number six? Canyons. Number seven? Naked points, etc., etc., etc. Is that clear? Yes. Is that one very clear? Yes. So, if God wish, next time we shall look at the mature stage of the river. But today, as an assignment, when you get your own private study, please try to read about the middle stage of the river, and then go further by reading about the lower section of the river before I come next time to continue with the presentation. Thank you very much. My name is Edgar Msimbe. I am a geography teacher at Morogoro Secondary School, teaching advanced level class. I am currently teaching Geography 1, and I am just from the class teaching Geography 1 and the topic of the denudation of processes, particularly river action. And I used, in my presentation, I used a modified lecture method because of the fact that the geography content is very large, and therefore modified lecture is significant because it facilitates the coverage of the contents. It speeds up the teaching and learning process because the learners are going to be involved in not too much, because too much involvement may consume much time, and therefore I used modified lecture method in order to make sure that I cover the contents at a material time. I also call upon for the geography teachers in Tanzania and in Morogoro in particular to use much the method, that is to use modified lecture method, because it speeds up the coverage of the contents, but also it can make the learners to be active, to listen comprehensively what the teacher presents, because if they don't, they are going to be moderately less, they cannot easily conquer with what the teacher is presenting. So using modified lecture makes them to become more active, to concentrate what the teacher is presenting. So I am calling upon that this method has to be used
Okay, what word can you have to the teachers who use other methods in teaching, apart from the kind of method that you have used?
Yeah, my message to them is that first, it is well clear that most of the teachers teaching Geography 1 complain that they don't cover the syllabus. And the reason why, for my observation, is that they make too much use of participatory method in class. So these are advanced level class. When you try to encourage them, to direct them, they can easier conquer with the use of what we call modified lecture method that can only help to cover the contents within the stipulated period. But otherwise, if they use too much participatory method in class, there is a danger of not covering the syllabus, and that may give room for most of the students not to manage to attempt better the national exam, because they will find the contents, some of them are not, they have not covered, and therefore they can even fail to do better in the exam.
Okay, thank you very much. Or will you have a message or any opinion to the RIO, I mean the Regional Education Officer of Morogoro, Engineer Joyce Baravuga, for commencing this program of Mwalimu wa Wiki?
Yes. Yes, first and foremost, let me congratulate much Engineer Joyce Baravuga for her innovations, because this is a very critical idea, and this shows that how active, how stable, how the knowledge of engineer is used, because this is an innovation, a creativity where not all RIO can have this idea. So I really appreciate her concern, and I really congratulate her and ask her to continue with this idea of formulating this period Mwalimu wa Wiki, because it can facilitate the teaching and learning process in schools. And even those students who may not have access to get reasonable information in schools, they can even peruse through the website and get more knowledge about the subject, the contents of different subjects. So I really appreciate her concern, and indeed she has showing best of her knowledge to commence this particular program, which is very seldom for RIO like her to come out with such kind of innovation. Indeed, I really appreciate her, and may His Almighty God grant her the best she wants. Thank you very much.
My name is Baravuga. I am a Form 6 girl at this school by Sekondari. I'm very proud of my school, and today I've got to learn about the development of river profile of Geography 1 chapter. According to my teacher, I learned so many things about river development. I went the early stage, middle stage, no, only early stage, but I had to learn the middle stage and upper stage. In the early stage, I learned about vertical erosion, whereby the river develops its and in the young stage, I learned about several features from the gorge, canals, interlocking spurs, waterfalls, rapids, and so on. And according to my teacher, I'm very proud of him. His teaching methodologies are very good, and I get to understand so many things. He always gives us chance to ask him questions whenever necessary, and he gives us the time to read more, and he gives us the chance and priority to learn the pure things before he can to teach us. So it's good about my teacher.
So it means you have enjoyed the lesson, did it?
Of course, I enjoyed the lesson.